What's going on, guys? It's Cimo, and welcome to episode 3 of our journey through the Yu-Gi-Oh! Banlist. If you missed the first 2 episodes, I'd highly recommend checking them out. I'll have the links down in the description so you guys can catch up. But oh man, we have some absurdly broken cards to cover today, so let's not waste any time and jump right in. Magispector Unicorn Kirin is a win level 6 spellcaster pendulum effect monster with 2000 attack and defense and a pendulum scale of 2. During either player's turn, you can target one pendulum monster in your monster zone and one monster your opponent controls, return them to the hand. You can only use this effect of Kirin once per turn, and it cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. What made Kirin so formidable was a combination of factors. Firstly, while Kirin belongs to the Magispector archetype, it could realistically be splashed into almost any pendulum deck, providing a free interruption off of a pendulum summon. Additionally, Kirin could not be targeted or destroyed by opposing card effects, creating almost zero counterplay and interactivity with the card, since you would most likely have to commit a resource in order to clear the Kirin, which then Kirin could use its effect to bounce that resource back to the hand. Furthermore, the bounce effect allowed you to not only keep your opponents at bay by disrupting their plays, but also allow you to reuse certain cards again on your turn. Since Kirin could also bounce itself, the pendulum player could easily resummon Kirin on the following turn, creating the same unwinnable play pattern. While Kirin is far away from being one of the greatest defenders on the Forbidden list, it was just an incredibly frustrating card to play against, and some decks just weren't equipped to deal with it. And speaking of incredibly frustrating to play against, Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King, is a light level 8 worm effect monster with 2950 attack and defense. To tribute summon this card face up, you can tribute continuous spells and trap cards you control as well as monsters. Unaffected by the effects of cards with the same card type, either monster, spell, or trap, as the original card type of the cards tributed for its tribute summon. Once per turn, during either player's turn, if you control this tribute summon monster, you can banish one continuous spell or trap card from your graveyard, then target one other card on the field, destroy it. I personally have a particular disdain for any boss monster that's nearly indestructible, and Masterpiece falls into that category without question. Masterpiece is remarkably easy to summon, not even requiring monsters on the field in order to tribute summon, while simultaneously becoming immune to 2 of the 3 basic card types in Yu-Gi-Oh!, either monster, spell, or trap. From a competitive standpoint, unless you are specifically playing a trap-oriented deck, most strategies struggle to out a monster spell immune Masterpiece, and trap decks almost lost immediately to a trap immune Masterpiece. That effect in and of itself is already extremely broken, but paired with the fact that Masterpiece can also destroy other cards on the field at quick effect speed, thwarting any attempt you might have to defeat him, puts this card in my eyes as one of the strongest boss monsters ever printed. Now, it wasn't impossible to out Masterpiece back in the day, and even by today's standards, there's probably more cards to deal with Masterpiece now than there were before during his reign of power, but there's still a small group of players who believe that Masterpiece should be able to come back, and to those players I say, hell no. Since we're on the topic of cards that give me an aneurysm, Max C is an Earth level 2 insect effect monster with 500 attack and 200 defense. During either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, immediately draw 1 card. You can only use 1 Max C per turn. I could honestly dedicate an entire video to Max C alone. There's that much to discuss here, but for the sake of brevity, I'll summarize my points as best I can. When Max C was initially released in Storm of Ragnarok, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a much different game. Games were a lot slower, and there was a significantly higher amount of back and forth between players. But as Yu-Gi-Oh! Aged, new summoning mechanics were introduced, and the game became much more special summon oriented as a result. This changed the dynamic for how Max C impacted the game. The biggest issue with Max C is that if your opponent has Max C and you do not, you are at a severe disadvantage and forced into an almost lose-lose situation. Let's say, for example, you begin performing your opening move and your opponent drops Max C. You realistically have one of 2 options. Either A, end your turn because you don't want to give your opponent extra cards, and most likely get killed by your opponent on their turn, since almost every deck can either OTK or set up to control the board to be in a winning position, or B, play through Max C and let your opponent draw over half their deck, which upon passing the turn, they will proceed to kill you regardless, since they have access to nearly every good card in their deck. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game doesn't have a resource system like most other card games. The individual cards themselves are, in fact, the resource. There's a reason why Pot of Greed is banned, and obviously we'll cover that in a later episode. And sure, there exist more counters to Max C now than ever before. Ash Blossom, Called by the Grave, Wave, Crossout Designator, but just because there exists outs to a card doesn't mean you'll always see them, nor does that justify the card being legal for competitive play. By that logic, why should we even have a ban list in the first place? Doesn't everything have a counter in some way or another? I personally prefer slower control-oriented Yu-Gi-Oh! That's what I grew up with, so you would think I would be a huge advocate for a card like Max C being unbanned. But as a control player, I also understand the value of card advantage and how even going +1 off of a Max C makes it that much more difficult for you to win the game, since your opponent now has an additional resource you have to contend with. There's an argument that Max C could go to 3, since then both players would have access to a maximum number of copies and you could deck build appropriately, and not to mention the OCG has had the card unlimited for several years. But the fact still remains that if your opponent has Max C and you do not, you become highly unfavored in that game. And that's just the short version as to why I believe Max C should never be unbanned, but I'm really curious to know what you guys think because this is one of the most divisive cards ever, so be sure to let me know down in the comments. Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion is a win level 2 machine tuner effect monster with 600 attack and 1000 defense. The only important part of O-Lion's text reads, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one Mecha Phantom Beast token, which is a machine win level 3 attack and defense 0 token. You can only use this effect of Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion once per turn. Once again, we have another token producer that also happens to be a tuner monster, so it's abusable with Crystron Halki Fibrax, allowing for rapid link climbing. The token being level 3 is a bit unique, as it helps for some higher level synchro plays, or a synchro with another level 1 tuner can easily make a Herald of the Arclight for a free negation. Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon was also able to easily tutor O-Lion from the deck, helping generate massive boards with multiple disruptions for the opponent to deal with. Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion was just another bystander that was banned as a result of the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Has evolved over the years. It's unfortunate, but sometimes it happens. Mind Master is a light level 1 psychic tuner effect monster with 100 attack and 200 defense. You can pay 800 life points and tribute one psychic type monster, except Mind Master, to special summon a level 4 or lower psychic type monster from your deck in face-up attack position. Lack of once per turn clause strikes again, as Mind Master is the center point of several different FTKs. One of the most popular and notorious FTKs involved Mind Master, Brain Research Lab, Winda, Priestess of Gusto, and Cam, Serenity of Gusto. Brain Research Lab completely negates the cost of Mind Master's effect, meaning it could be used an infinite number of times. By tributing any other psychic type monster with Mind Master's effect, you could summon Winda directly from the deck, activate it again to tribute that Winda to summon another, then activate it a third time, tributing the second Winda to summon Cam. Cam has an effect to shuffle 2 Gusto monsters from the graveyard into the deck to draw 1 card. By having multiple copies of Cam in the deck, you can essentially perform this loop an infinite amount of times to be able to draw your entire deck until you draw and win with Exodia. I don't even want to imagine what would be possible if Mind Master was legal in today's modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. The thought of Mind Master returning just makes me sick. Orcust Harp Horror is a dark level 4 machine effect monster with 1700 attack and 1400 defense. You can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one Orcust monster from your deck, except Orcust Harp Horror. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except dark monsters. You can only use this effect of Orcust Harp Horror once per turn. Harp Horror is primarily responsible for Orcust's dominance in the metagame prior to its banning. Harp Horror not only helped start your Orcust combos, but allowed you to extend through opponent's disruption if they attempted to stop your combo with a hand trap or any sort of interruption. Locking you into dark attribute monsters is hardly a downside, as most of the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are in fact dark. Most people believe that the Harp Horror ban was to curb Orcust's power level, as it was the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! For several formats, and Konami wanted to allow other decks to have a chance in the spotlight. Most players believe that Harp Horror could return to 1, and it wouldn't really have much effect on the format. The OCG has it at 1 currently at the time of recording this video, so maybe it's something we should try out. Now we're getting into some deep shit. Performage Plushfire is a fire level 4 spellcaster pendulum effect monster with 1000 attack and defense and a pendulum scale of 5. Enter the first of the most poorly designed pendulum monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! If a Performage monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your pendulum zone, then take 500 damage. You can only use this effect of Performage Plushfire once per turn. For the most part, this effect wasn't that bad since it's stuck with a hard once per turn clause, but the monster effect is a different story. Plushfire's monster effect reads, if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon one Performage monster from your hand or deck, except another copy of Plushfire. Keep in mind that if Plushfire is destroyed while in the pendulum zone, its monster effect will trigger, meaning it doesn't actually have to be a monster on the field in order for the effect to trigger. Similar to Lunalight Tiger in the previous episode, it seems that Konami just missed the mark on which one of these two effects desperately needed a hard hard once per turn clause. Plushfire's monster effect is incredibly abusable with cards such as Luster Pendulum, the Draco Slayer, Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer, as well as Wavering Eyes, generating the Pendulum player tons of free advantage for absolutely no reason and with zero downside. This was one of the essential combo pieces that contributed to the heavily feared Perform Mages in PAL strategy, otherwise known as Pepe, which most players believe would have resulted in the next Tier 0 format had it gone unchecked. Pepe absolutely dominated the OCG, and the TCG attempted to act swiftly to ensure that history did not repeat itself, releasing the first ever adjusted list, which was a ban list that came prior to when the ban list was supposed to be dropped, banning Performage Plushfire from competitive play. The damage, however, had already been done, as both YCS Sydney and YCS Atlanta 2016 were both absolutely plagued by full power Pepe. And speaking of full power Pepe, we still have a plethora of other banned cards to discuss from this deck, so let's move on to Performapal Monkey Board. Monkey Board is an Earth level 6 beast pendulum effect monster with 1000 attack, 2400 defense, and a pendulum scale of 1. Its pendulum effect, which is the only effect that really matters, says unless you have a Performapal card in your other pendulum zone, this card's pendulum scale becomes 4. During your main phase, if this card was activated this turn, you can add one level 4 or lower Performapal monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Performapal Monkey Board once per turn. While the pendulum effect of Monkey Board does in fact have a hard once per turn clause for once, it was completely irrelevant considering Monkey Board solved the core issue with pendulum summoning, which was acquiring your pendulum scales. Monkey Board allowed you to complete your pendulum scale by searching for any high scale Performapal monster, such as Performapal Lizard Draw or Performapal Guitardle. And if that weren't enough, both of these cards then allowed you to draw even more cards, so then you can start to see why this deck was so feared. Surprisingly, Monkey Board was first limited on the February 2016 adjusted list, but was then quickly banned thereafter on the August 2016 ban list, as even having Monkey Board remain at one copy was a mistake. And if Monkey Board weren't good enough, you could even use it to search our next banned card, Performapal Skullcrobat Joker. Joker is a dark level 4 spellcaster pendulum effect monster with 1800 attack, 100 defense, and a pendulum scale of 8. Its monster effect, which is mainly the most relevant part of its text, says when this card is normal summoned, you can add one Performapal monster, Magician Pendulum monster, or Odd Eyes monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of Joker. Skullcrobat Joker was the Stratos of the Performapal deck, and the deck's primary normal summon. This card allowed you to search Monkey Board and then complete your pendulum scale off of a single card. Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer could be searched, which was one of the deck's primary combo enablers, as well as the entire Pendulum Magician and Odd Eyes archetypes as well, giving you quite a large pool of targets to choose from. Similarly to Monkey Board, Joker was first limited on the February 2016 adjusted list, but then was unlimited on the June 2017 ban list, most likely to help sell the brand new Pendulum Evolution set that had just been released in the same month. But after Pendulum Magicians ultimately exerted their dominance as one of the strongest decks during this era, Joker finally met its fate on the ban list in February 2018. Phoenixian Cluster Amaryllis is a fire level 8 plant effect monster with 2200 attack and 0 defense. This card cannot be special summoned except with its own effect or with Phoenixian Seed. If this card attacks, it is destroyed after damage calculation. If this card you control is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. During your end phase, you can remove from play one plant type monster from your graveyard to special summon this card from your graveyard in defense position. Quite simply, Amaryllis is part of an FTK loop involving Topologic Bomber Dragon, where if you could dump enough plant monsters into the graveyard using cards such as Lone Fire Blossom and Predaplant Orphis Scorpio, you could revive Amaryllis during the end phase that many number of times. So, you would banish a plant to summon Amaryllis, this would trigger the Bomber Dragon to blow up the board, Amaryllis would then be sent back to the graveyard, trigger again, burn your opponent for 800 damage, you can then banish another plant monster from the graveyard to summon the Amaryllis, and effectively do this over and over again until your opponent's life points hit 0. The combo was actually relatively easy to establish, and it was really just a relic of older Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, you see on Amaryllis, it says remove from play, it doesn't even say banish, that's how old this card is, so this is just one of those cards that needed to be cleaned up because it was bound to be abused at some point. Man, we're only 3 episodes in, and we still have so much to cover. We haven't even gotten to the Synchro monsters, Xyz monsters, Link monsters, the most powerful spells in Yu-Gi-Oh! And also some traps. We still have a lot more coming. Be sure to let me know down in the comments what you're most looking forward to, and maybe what your favorite card was in this episode. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive early one-day access to both the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Yu-Gi-Oh! Progression series. Thank you so much again, and we will see you next time.